You're teaching. I wonder if Daniel will fall asleep.
Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. We are in, well, goodness, what is this? Lesson 7, I think it is. But it is John 9. John chapter 9 is going to be our text this morning. It's lesson 7, a man born blind. Daniel asked me to fill in for him, and I agreed to it before I realized this was a whole chapter, and there's a lot going on in the text this morning. Before we get into it, I want to read from the beginning of John. John 1, beginning in verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Verse 9. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through Him, yet the world did not know Him. He came to His own, and His own people did not receive Him. But to all who did receive Him, who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God. This morning we're going to consider an encounter which really illuminates the darkness of this world, and how people both receive and reject the light of God. So with that, we'll begin with the prayer. Lord, we come to You this morning completely humbled by Your love, Lord, by Your power, Your majesty, Your holiness, Your righteousness, Your grace. We thank You for the gift of the Spirit, these holy scriptures that You have given to us to know You. We're so thankful for the life of Your Son, Jesus. Lord, His teachings, His miracles, the way He lived, the love that He showed, the sacrifice that He gave, Lord, so that we could be Your children. We pray this morning that we will see the true light. Lord, that we will accept the gifts that You have given to us. Lord, that we will not be blind, but we will let You heal our blindness. And we will live our lives in boldness of faith. Lord, turning to You, championing Your name, Your truthfulness, Your power. Lord, we ask that You would be with us this morning. Help us to focus on You. Help us to be open and honest as we study from Your Word. Lord, help us to be compassionate with each other, discerning. Lord, help us to go out and live righteously after today. In Christ's name, amen. All right, so it's wonderful to have everybody with us this morning. As I mentioned, our text this morning is going to be the entire chapter of John 9, okay? We are not going to read it this morning. I hope that most of y'all have read it before class. John 9 is the instance of Jesus miraculously healing the blind man, okay? Just to kind of go through a little bit of the context. Oh, I forgot to do our memory verse, didn't I? Okay. Let's do that first. Okay, so let's say this before we jump into it. Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. but seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things added to you. Okay. So, John 9, the encounter of Jesus miraculously healing this blind man. All right, the context, the setting, the characters, the plot. What is the setting of this encounter? What are some parts of the setting of this encounter from anybody? Y'all remember?
There's a question and answer. So they saw someone and they asked, what about this thing?
Getting into the plot. But okay, so the setting is seemingly a relatively intimate, a relatively small group, kind of where we pick up. All right, where are they? Where are they physically? Does anybody remember? Where? Did I hear someone? Okay, and so they're going to be in Jerusalem. Okay, this is going to be in Jerusalem. It's almost certainly going to be outside the temple proper. I'm uncertain if it's kind of in the temple compound or if it's going to be somewhere else in Jerusalem or the Jerusalem area, but it is going to be in Jerusalem. This is soon following the end of the Feast of Booths. Okay, does anybody remember what the Feast of Booths is? Anybody recall? Yes.
Basically, it was like the best comparison I could give it to modern day would be like a free farmers market or something like that.
Yeah.
In the temple for people to come around and sample what everybody's.
So it is going to be this feast where it causes them to remember their nomadic life. Okay, and so this is a feast where God challenges them to remember how they lived in the wilderness whenever they just left Egypt. Okay, how did they live in the wilderness other than in tents? How did they eat? How did they drink in the wilderness? All right, so it's a feast celebrating, causing to remember the provision of God. I think that's important as we consider this encounter. All right, the reliance on God, the provision from God. Okay. Again, this is a long text, a long encounter. Eventually, the setting spreads throughout Jerusalem. It goes into the temple as these rumors and conversations start happening about the miracle. It goes into the gathering place of the Pharisees or the Jews, some kinds of leaders, okay? And then it kind of retreats again at the end of the chapter into this more intimate affair, okay? And so this encounter really kind of spreads throughout all of Jerusalem, okay, at different aspects. There's a lot of characters in this text. Who are some of the characters that we see in this text?
The man.
All right, so we got the blind man. Who else do we see in John 9? What other characters?
The neighbors.
The neighbors, okay, yeah, absolutely. Pharisees and the Jews. Who else? Disciples of, and Jesus is there, okay. And so who else? Who's one of the final characters that we see? His parents, okay. So we have a lot of characters in here. There's a lot going on. Like I said, we're not going to read the entire text, but just to kind of briefly recap, so we're sort of all on the same page. What goes on in John 9? Jesus has really just escaped an attempt on his life. The Jews tried to stone him for blasphemy, and he dodged through, he got away, and right after this attempt on his life, seemingly, Jesus is with some of his disciples, and Jesus sees this blind man. There's a question and response about, why is this man blind? And Jesus replies to his disciples that it is to display the works of God. And so he heals this blind man. It happens to be on the Sabbath. And so this is one of Jesus' miracles on the Sabbath. We may know that that's kind of an important theme throughout Jesus' ministry. The blind man then goes and tells everyone, which leads to his and his parents being interrogated by the Pharisees, by other Jews. Okay? What happened here? What's going on? All right, this interrogation of both the blind man and his parents by some of the leaders. This results in the man's confession, both of Jesus as a prophet, okay, which results in his expulsion from the temple. And then Jesus finds him after he is cast out of the temple area. And he talks to this man, and he tells once again this man that he is the Son of Man, that he is the Messiah, which the faith of this man, the awareness of this man in Jesus, the healing, the miracle that he experienced, it causes him to confess Jesus, acknowledge him as the Messiah, to worship him. And then finally, some Pharisees overhear this final encounter, and Jesus condemns them. All right? That's generally the plot. That's generally what occurs in John 9, this encounter, this elongate encounter of a beautiful, wonderful, really just unbelievable to many miracle of Jesus healing this blind man, all right, leads to him being cast out of the temple, seeing the Messiah, acknowledging the Messiah, and then Jesus' condemnation of those that see. Okay? So lots of highs and lows. This is a very dramatic encounter. This is a very dramatic story. Okay? Before we get into some of the discussion, any comments, questions about the context? Anything else y'all think may be important as we consider any particulars of the plot and storyline before we get into it?
I think it's important to note that Jesus is obviously one of the primary characters in all these encounters, but in this one specifically, he shows up at the beginning, and then he kind of steps back, and he shows up at the end. Is this something you're going to touch on?
You can go ahead, but yeah.
And that middle section, he's not really involved. He's not directly involved. And what we see from this encounter is people wrestling with how to handle what he has done. And I think it speaks to a lot of the challenges that we have within our hearts, within our lives, as we wrestle with understanding what Jesus has done.
Yep.
And what Jesus has said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I think that is very important, very noteworthy as we consider how we're like this blind man. Okay? Anything else? Anything else? Okay. Yes, sir.
The Pharisees and probably others, they had a perspective of what they thought was true, right, and all of a sudden that was challenged and caused them to have to rethink. And it kind of goes along with what Daniel was saying. When we have to rethink either what we were taught when we were little or what we believe for whatever reason, when we encounter the truth, that creates a conflict.
Yeah. And in the discussion, as I was preparing for this, I basically phrased that as being blind and being blinded. Okay, and we'll discuss what I mean by that. But I think this is really worth considering. Really, the two different camps of characters. Okay, those that are blind and those that are blinded, and how both groups respond to Jesus. Yes, sir.
And this probably doesn't go with the lesson, but one thing I noticed throughout this, his questioning and interview and everything. He reminds me of a lot of unbelievers nowadays when something great or comes seemingly out of nowhere.
Mhm.
I don't know. He says, I don't know who it was. I don't know how it happened. I just know it happened.
Mhm.
You know, just like a lot of unbelievers. I don't know how I was able to pay the bills this month. Lord knows I wasn't working enough.
Yeah.
How it happened.
And again, I think that kind of goes to this idea that we'll get into about what it means to be blind and being able to see, and those that see but are blinded. No?
This is also one of the few times that Jesus did not talk to this man first. He might have known his heart. Jesus knows the hearts of all men, but there's nothing in the text that actually, the man did not approach Jesus himself like we had in the past lessons. This is something I think, I don't know why the disciples decided to say, okay, look at this blind man. Did he sin or did his parents sin because he's blind? And then Jesus uses that to teach and to heal. But the man didn't come, I thought it was kind of unusual that the man didn't come before Jesus before.
So I think that's a perfect segue to kind of get into sort of my first discussion question. Just to preface everybody, I've been spending some time in Isaiah recently, and so there's been several triggers going through this story for me that made me think about Isaiah. Okay, but kind of going off of Noel's comment, that's exactly how it seems. Okay, is that Jesus saw this man. The man didn't necessarily, well, he certainly didn't see Jesus, okay? But it doesn't indicate that he heard Jesus, all right? Jesus saw this man, and Jesus went to him. The initial interaction of this story is not between this man and Jesus. It's between Jesus and his disciples, okay? There's this interaction. The question I have, for whom did Jesus perform this miracle? Did y'all consider that? Have you considered that? For whom did Jesus perform this miracle? I think to Noel's point, so many of the encounters we see, Jesus responds, reacts, does things for the person that benefits from, or from the person directly that hears the teaching. For whom did Jesus perform this miracle? What do y'all think?
His disciples.
Okay.
Everyone that was willing to see.
Yeah, they were questioning him about the blind man.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows why, but they were. And he's using this as a teaching moment for them. He says, I have to work while it's day. And so I think he's doing it for the disciples, but I mean, he did it for more than just that, but specifically for the disciples so that they could see. And then also, since he did it on the Sabbath, he knew what was going to happen with the Jews. Just as soon as people noticed that the blind man was running around seeing, he knew what was going to happen with that.
So definitely the initial miracle, it very clearly seems to be for the disciples. There's a physical benefit to this man, but it is a response to the disciples' question, really. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments?
Okay. One overriding theme that kept popping up in my mind is the disciples asked the question, who sinned, his parents or him? And then when it came down to the Pharisees, and Jesus healed the man on the Sabbath day, they said, this man is a sinner. It seems like it's an overriding theme underneath, I guess, that these things were happening because these people were sinners, and Jesus trying to teach them. That is not the case. That this man wasn't blind because he was a sinner, and Jesus healed this man on Sabbath, and he wasn't a sinner. And it's an idea that Jesus came for a different purpose and a different reason than what they were thinking.
Before moving on, was anybody just overwhelmingly struck by the irony in this story? okay? They condemn this man for a sinner. That's the reason that he is blind. Jesus condemns the Pharisees for being the true blind ones, okay? The Pharisees are the ones that refuse to see this miracle, okay? Refuse to acknowledge this miracle, what it indicates, refuse to acknowledge Jesus' ministry. Okay, we read further on, the Pharisees say, I follow the prophet Moses. This man is not a prophet. Well, if they really followed Moses, they would remember that Moses told them, hey, there's going to be coming a prophet after me that is going to give you a new covenant, okay? And this man is following that prophet that Moses spoke of. That the irony of this story is just overwhelming. We have to see that. That's one of the things we are intended to see, this comparison of being blind and seeing, but yet blinded. I saw a few other hands over here. Yes, Jamie?
So to answer your question, one thing I thought about who was it for, is in verse 3 of chapter 9. Jesus answers, neither this man or his parents sin, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. So it was a greater purpose, like you said, not just for this man. It was for anyone that was willing to see.
What was that greater purpose?
To see that, God doesn't think like us. I don't know if you have a better answer for that, but I mean, it goes kind of to what Dennis was saying. Like, people make assumptions that, bad things happen because we sinned, and that's not what God says.
Mm-hmm. Danny?
It's probably to show that he was the light of the world.
Yeah.
But one thing about this miracle too was the man actually had to go do something for it to be activated, I guess. Mm-hmm. He had to show faith. Mm-hmm. And other miracles that were done, right on the spot, and you could see it.
Mm-hmm. So not only did he do something to receive the blessing initially, but boy, did he really show faith after he realized the fullness of that blessing. I think we'll talk about more. One other thing I just want to present to y'all, like I said, I've been in Isaiah a lot recently. Isaiah 35, verse 5 says, then the eyes of the blind will be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. A few verses later, in another section, chapters later in Isaiah 42, verse 6, I am the Lord, I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I will give you as a covenant for the people, a light for the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. So, in addition to his disciples, in addition to this man, in addition to the Pharisees that were there, I would suggest to you that this is part of Jesus' fulfillment of prophecies. Okay? I think it's, in light of that comment, I think it's kind of important to think about the setting of this event. The setting of this event was initially isolated, but again, this spread throughout all of Jerusalem. This spread throughout all of Jerusalem immediately following one of the major national feast days, holidays, these pilgrimage days. This event spread throughout all of the nation. Okay? We also read in the encounter, one of the accusations is nobody's ever healed a blind man before. Nobody has ever healed a blind man before. These prophecies of Isaiah are impactful to the Israelites. These prophecies of Isaiah are known by the Pharisees. They say that they're looking for the Messiah. They say that they're praying for this Messiah. They say at this time in Jesus' ministry, they are waiting for God to redeem and restore Israel. God says He will open the eyes of the blind, but they don't see when they open the eyes of the blind. I would suggest to you that part of this, again, is Jesus' fulfillment of prophecy, that Jesus performed this miracle for the nation of Israel to realize that the prophecies of Isaiah are coming true. This is the time. Open your eyes. This is the time. Yes, sir.
I think he's pretty clear at the end of chapter 20, verse 13. Jesus performed many other signs, including this one, in the presence of his disciples. He did it for his disciples because they were going to endure a lot. They had to truly believe, right? But these are written that you would believe that Jesus is the Messiah.
Absolutely.
Because he fulfilled everything you just talked about, right? It was all this fulfillment of, plus things that can't happen, right? What he did to this man can't happen. He's either a liar, or he's a fake, or he's the real Messiah. And some people that have power said, well, he's fake. And a lot of people said, he's the Messiah, and won't follow.
Consider that. This, for whom did Jesus perform this miracle? He performed this miracle for Israel. He performed this miracle for the world, for all of the future children of God, to know that God is true, that Jesus is the true light of the world, that those who see Him, as John says, can become children of God. Thoughts, comments? That's a lot, y'all. That might be in a wild direction y'all have never considered. Yes, sir, Danny.
Yeah, about the sins of being upon the parents to the child. Ezekiel 18 deals with that, I believe. It says that the sins of the father and the mother are not passed on to the children. Kind of paraphrasing.
Yeah.
No. They should have known that.
But there's also a passage that says the consequences of the sins of the father can be passed on to the 10th generation. Here's some people that were saying, okay, help me clear it up. Is this man, was he born blind because of something his parents did? And Jesus said, no. You get it all, all messed up. No, that's right. There are consequences of people's sins to generations after, right? Definitely. But he was trying to clear up, no, it had nothing to do with that. Really a great question. I mean, wouldn't you have that same question? Why are these things happening to people? Is it something that they did, or their parents did, or something else?
So let's go there. So we've talked a little bit about it. Who saw who first? Jesus saw this man first. Okay, in many understandings of that phrase, Jesus saw this man first. Other than blind, use words other than blind. How would y'all describe the blind man? Current condition, setting, culturally? Beggar. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Hopeless? Helpless? Hopeless? Yeah. Yeah. Helpless? Guiltless? Okay. That's interesting.
I was impressed with the way he answered Pharisees. He showed more intelligence than I think a beggar would have. He was uneducated.
Okay. Definitely exhibits faith, exhibits courage more than we may assume from somebody in his condition.
You can say marginalized. The way that they talk about him, he's a sinner. They clearly had preconceived ideas because of his condition.
Marginalized. I think that's a really good word. The main word I thought of was destitute, but I think marginalized is a great word. So culturally, religiously, socially, economically, this man was marginalized. Okay, he wasn't part of the in crowd. There were even restrictions about what he could do as far as going to the temple. Okay, there's obviously limitations, restrictions about what he can do economically. Okay, what he can do for himself, kind of this helplessness aspect. Okay, he was not part of the in group. There was a lot that we could say was sad, was poor about this man's life before Jesus entered it. Again, as we've discussed, the reason he was blind, though, was not anything he did. It was not anything that his parents did. Okay? This was just his situation. This was his situation at the time that resulted in downtroddenness, marginalization, sadness, self-guilt, a lack of willpower, motivation. Y'all ever been in anything like that? Can y'all relate in any way to a sense of marginalization, a sense of helplessness, a sense of hopelessness? Your situation is not going to be any better. You've been kicked down, and it's not your fault. Can you relate to that in any way? Depression. Absolutely.
All right. I think what you're describing is, have we ever felt sorry for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know anybody who hasn't, at some point or another, kind of felt sorry for yourself for the situation that you're in, especially if it's of no fault of your own.
You know, and I definitely think that can be part of it. Another thought is some kind of economic or social situation. Maybe you don't feel sorry for yourself, but it's kind of a lower position, okay? But there's nothing you necessarily did to be there, okay? You're not necessarily sorry for yourself, but there are things that other people, you look around, there's things other people have that could be better, okay? For whatever reason. Guys, you know, let's be honest. We live in the United States of America, 21st century United States of America. There's a lot of people around the world that they don't have what we have at all in anything, okay? I don't necessarily know if everybody is sorry, but their situations are very different from our situations, okay? There's this, in some way, this concept of marginalization, and you're in this situation, nothing that you did. Jesus says, thinking about this story, this situation exists to prove the work of God. These situations exist to prove the work of God. This blind man didn't necessarily ask Jesus to perform this miracle. Jesus saw this man. Jesus saw this man. God acted on this man to prove the work and the power of God. There's been several instances that fairly dramatic that I've kind of witnessed some of this. All right, let me give you some examples. So there was a family that we knew in Houston, and you know they were kind of at church, but they weren't really super involved in the community. They went out on a lake day. It was a mother, father, and a couple of teenage sons. They went out on a lake day. The dad was driving the boat. One of the sons got caught underneath the propeller, cut off his leg. He almost died. Through that situation, you know, we saw that family, their faith was strengthened. He was about to die. This kid was about to die. But through that, through the work of God, through the ability, this son did not die. This family, their faith was strengthened through this experience. Can you think how you were if you were the father in that instance? Can you think if you were the mother in that instance? Can you think if you were the son in that instance? Obviously, we are all given decisions about how to react to Jesus, how to respond, to react to the work of God. But there's instances where we're in these situations, in these positions. It's not for us, you know. These are bad situations, but they're in this world to prove the work of God. there's good that comes out of that situation. Another example, if y'all remember, Byron tells the story of a family in San Antonio. Their son was killed by a drunk driver. The parents then, over time, start going to the prison. Basically, they end up adopting this man, sort of as their surrogate son. They have this close relationship. They forgive. They love each other. The man becomes a Christian. What a terrible situation. Who would think this situation can prove anything about the working of God? But through that, it's overwhelming to see the work of God through these situations where we feel completely helpless, disenfranchised, destitute, not able to do anything. There's hard situations in life. There are hard situations in life. Some of these situations exist to prove the work of God. Jamie, you've had your hand up a while.
Well, because the whole time we've been talking, Jeff and I, when we're studying about this, it makes me think about 1 Corinthians 10:13, where it says, people sometimes want to read 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you which is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way of escape that you may be able to bear. And what Jeff and I were talking about is, as Christians, we have something that non-Christians don't. Should we choose to, we have a God that, gives us whatever it is we need. Now we have to take the action, we have to see it, but there is hope as a Christian in all those horrible things you described. And, I don't know, that's the verse that just rings in my head over and over when you talk about situations.
Thank you, Dennis.
There are extreme examples like what you gave.
Very
They
dramatic.
don't have to be as extreme.
Not at
I
all.
think every person goes through something in their life where they're either going to become stronger or they're going to turn their back to God. And, we have that decision to make. You explained the extreme example. But I don't think that, for the majority of us, that is true. There are things that people don't know about that go on in each one of our lives, and things that we face that really bring us to our knees at times. And what are we going to do? Are we going to put our trust and faith in God to let Him help us get through this, and then become a better worker for the Lord? I think every one of us faces that decision somewhere in our lives.
You were reading my notes, weren't you? Yeah, like those are dramatic examples, okay? But if we cannot relate to that, if we cannot think of these instances in our own lives, in the lives of our family, in the lives of others that we know, we're blind. We're blind. Yes, sir.
This whole discussion brings to mind an incident that actually happened to me back in 2005. Got into a real bad wreck. I didn't get anything out of it other than a little pain in my neck for a little bit. And we went to clean out the truck because it was dead. Looking at how that truck came out, I couldn't think of any other explanation as to how I'm healthy, let alone alive. Other than God had His hand on me that day. God Himself was looking out for me that day. Going by that truck, at the very least, I should be sitting in a wheelchair right now.
Absolutely. We think through all these instances, and we have them. We have these encounters. We have these encounters as we go through our lives, and we are given the option of how to react. Okay, we can allow these encounters to illuminate our eyes, to run out the darkness. We can allow Jesus, we can allow God to make us that are blind be able to see, or we can be blinded by these instances, these encounters with Jesus. So to get back into the text, the blind man saw. Boy, did he have faith. Did he have faith? faced with the interrogation, with the consequences that he endured following this, boy, did he have faith. He saw the light. His eyes were opened. Okay? The Pharisees, Jews, others, they did not at all react like this man. Their reaction, they became blinded to Jesus. They reacted disbelief, okay? Interrogation, scorn. They looked for any other possible explanation to explain this. They reacted in legalism, contempt, anger, okay? Why do you think they were hardened in response to this miracle? Why do you think they were hardened in response?
They had a preconceived notion of what the Messiah was going to be, and if it didn't fit their idea, it was rejected without any consideration.
So I phrase that a little bit differently. They had assumed devoutness and knowledge of Scriptures, and so they assumed they were devout, knew what it said, but that caused them to not look.
They had already made up their mind about Jesus.
Huh?
You know, they had already, it goes back to that preconception. But they already made up their mind, regardless of what Jesus did, it was never going to prove to them that he was the Messiah.
Some of them did. Some of them did. But I would challenge you, because multiple times throughout sort of this 4-chapter section, you know, we kind of get these groups of the Pharisees and leaders that say, what Jesus just did, it divided them. It divided them. And some of them had that intrigue, and they continued to pursue it, but it was very divisive, and many of them had made up their mind.
And I'm talking about the ones that had already made up their mind. There was nothing that's going to be able to do. You're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Even in here, there was a division among the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones who had already made up their mind, it's almost like their heart was so hard as stone, nothing was going to be able to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's Jesus in his own words to say, you can't bring sword into the divide. And you see that it's dividing the house, right? And I don't think it's just about not seeing, it's also not hearing. Because you have the Pharisees repeatedly ask, interrogate, tell us this. The guy's like, hey, I told you already. I told you multiple different ways. I don't know how he did it. All I'm saying is he did it. Then they say, well, you know, we're of Moses. Who are you? And so, Jesus, the Son of Man, is also Moses. And Moses points to the Son. But they're blind, they're deaf, they will not hear, or they will not see.
So a few chapters later, a couple of instances later, John states that really these teachings, these interactions with the Pharisees, okay, it was in fulfillment of what Isaiah said in Isaiah chapter 6. Keep on hearing, but do not understand these people. Go tell them, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed. Then I said, how long, O Lord? And he said, until cities lie waste without inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste, and the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. And though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak whose stump remains when it fell. The holy seed is its stump. John says that much of Jesus' ministry is in fulfillment of what Isaiah says right there. It is a wedge issue. It does prove those who have hearts that follow, that want to serve God, and those that do not want to serve God. Okay, it challenges those people. What this ends up doing is it causes them to reject, just reject. Okay. It leads them to not realize God's working and true teaching. It disallows the Jewish man from offering sacrifices to God in the temple. They misunderstand and skew the intent of Sabbath and the worship of God. They ignore the provision of God. They prove to be hypocrites. They condemn and crucify Jesus. And at the end of the chapter, we see a reminder again, they bring judgment upon themselves by allowing themselves to be blinded. Okay? I ran out of time. Consider these responses, how the blind can see and how those that see can be blind. Jesus is offering to show the works of God in His lives. He is offering to make the blind see. Thank you for your attention.